Bob Harari.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, before we get started, we're working on the City Hall roof replacement project. I just told the contractor to keep it down. If it gets too noisy, you can't hear, please just wave and I'll tell the contractor to pull off, okay? Thank you for that. Okay, first we have public appearances. Under the Brown Act, public comments for matters on the agenda must relate to the agenda item, and public comments for matters not on the agenda must relate to the subject matter jurisdiction of this legislative body. This is a warning that if a member of the public attending this meeting remotely violates the Brown Act by failing to comply with these requirements of the Brown Act, then that speaker may be muted. We will now open for any public comments.
I just wanted to thank the police chief and everyone who took care of us during Car Week. I realized, oh, I'm at the right committee to actually be able to say publicly, it was a really fantastic job. And, you know, I live on Dolores, as you guys know, and it was just good work. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room?
Good afternoon, Dale Byrne, and I'm speaking as a resident. Maybe Carmel cares a little, but I was just wondering if there's any way that we could sort of do a quick survey with maybe a public works truck driving around, visibility issues around corners. I know that comes up in this meeting once in a while, but there are a number of them that the bushes, the shrubs have grown out, and I'm seeing near, you know, situations quite often. So maybe instead of piecemealing it in this, just do a quick drive around. And the other thing is, if you see a situation like that, is that something the city can just go out and trim if it's in the city right away, or do you have to contact the owner? I was just wondering if you could respond to that. Like, if we talk to the owner, could we have their gardener do it, or is it something the city needs to do? All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dale. If I may reply a little bit. Yeah, we can certainly meet and kind of go over logistics of a drive around. If anyone sees any kind of visibility issue at any time in the public right away, by all means, contact Public Works and we'll get to it as soon as we can. Anybody else in the room, please?
You want to add to that?
Bob, the other part of the question,
Sure.
though, was, you know, what's our right as a city when it comes to things hanging over or in the right of way that maybe were planted by a property owner? I mean, if there's an immediate safety issue and it's in the right of way, we will take care of that right away. If we're alerted to it, we may not know about it. If it's, you know, on private property and it's hanging over into the public right of way, and, you know, maybe it isn't causing an immediate issue, then we'll try to work with the property owner. But if it's an immediate issue, we can take care of it right away as long as it's in the city area. We just need to know about it, so please let us know.
Great. Thanks, Brendan.
And I'll add to that as well. Dale, just so you know, staff is constantly driving around, and when we identify issues that need to be taken care of, we do take care of them. We don't bring them to this committee. This is for the residents and businesses to bring issues that maybe we didn't see or they want to have us address here publicly. But if it's a trimming issue or a sign that needs to be replaced and we see it, it's something that we take care of. Yeah.
I'm Todd Tice. Wasn't going to comment about that, but there is a little spot just past on San Carlos, past Brophy's on the right side. It's kind of grown in a little bit there. It could be looked at. Anyway, just real quick.
Okay.
But I just wanted to comment also, as a business owner in downtown, I thought the traffic flow in downtown was exceptional this year. Had some complaints in the previous years. We were getting blocked out too early. I think sometime after 6:30 or so is when the rerouting started downtown. And I really heard no complaints from any businesses, and I heard no complaints even from any of the patrons or those that were here with their cars and things like that. I really don't know if it could have gone a whole lot better. I thought it was great. It didn't matter if it was at 6 o'clock or if it was at 10:30 when we were heading back from dinner, things like that. It seemed like it was flowing great, and I heard really no complaints from anybody the whole time. I just wanted to thank the chief and the whole staff for placing everything out there at the right times, and it was really good.
Thank you.
Great. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else in the chambers? Do we have anyone on Zoom that wishes to speak? Okay, we'll move on to old business. These are items previously discussed requiring follow-up. The first one is receive a report from Chief Tomasi on Assembly Bill AB 413, requirements and a proposed implementation plan. Chief.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. We put this first on the agenda because this is a big item for the city, and obviously it impacts all of us. We recognize that this does impact what we consider sacred, that's our parking downtown and the limited stock that we have with parking. So in May, we came to you with initial overview of this law, and then we said we'd come back to you with a plan, and that's why we're here today. I will make a transparent statement right now that my final numbers that I put in the staff report are a little off. I went out yesterday for one last count, and there's about 3 or 4 spaces that were changed. So if you've read the staff report in here, the numbers of the final will be off, but they're accurate in this presentation. And please allow staff a little bit of flexibility if we do move forward with this plan. We may be off by 1 or 2 spaces, but the gist is here of where we're headed with this plan. So I'll start off quickly with a recap of the law, and if you could just hit the next slide. We all know that in October 2023, Governor Gavin Newsom signed this law into effect. It became effective January 1st, 2024, and required cities to implement this. However, enforcement isn't in effect until January 1 of 2025. For this year, it's supposed to be warnings, but it gives us also the year to put this into place. The bill is commonly known as the daylighting bill, and its goal is to improve visibility and safety for pedestrians and drivers. The term daylighting refers to the practice of keeping a clear zone of a specific distance on the approach side of an intersection or crosswalk. And if you look at this slide, it shows you just the passenger side of a vehicle as you approach an intersection. The additional language of what is known as Section 22-500 of the California Vehicle Code is that within 20 feet of a vehicle approach side of any marked or unmarked crosswalk, or within 15 feet of any crosswalk where a curb extension is present, as shown here. And we include curbs and sidewalks as we look at this plan in this plan. Additional language of this section, which was also added, is a local authority may establish a different distance if both of the following requirements are met. A local authority establishes the different distance by ordinance that includes a finding that the different distance is justified by established traffic safety standards. And 2, a local authority has marked the different distance at the intersection using paint or a sign. Nobody knows what that means. What does an established traffic safety standard really mean? This is an option that we can consider down the road, but since nobody really has clarification on this part of it, it's not something we could tackle over this year. The other options that are in this law, which get us in compliance with the law, and this is an important part, we want to be compliant come January 1st, is that a local authority in that same distance, 20 feet from an intersection or 15 feet with the curb extension, can make a commercial vehicle loading zone. That would be a 20-minute zone for people to load and unload and businesses to use to load and unload. The local authority, we can do that if we adopt and identify those intersections and locations by ordinance. We all know in here an ordinance takes 2 months to implement. So we would have to bring it to council, and then a month later it could be adopted. The local authority, if we do that, the local authority has to mark those loading zones by paint or signage, just like we have shown there. Another option we have is, instead of making them red zones, we could make them a white zone for bicycle and electric vehicle parking, which would also meet the law in that same distance of 20 feet or 15 feet with the curb extension area. So as we presented in May, the next steps are we're looking at ways to implement this law so we are compliant with the law, and then we can really look for ways to lessen the impact of our parking downtown to help us maintain that very valuable parking stock that we have. Next slide. Wait, I just said that. Okay, next slide after that. Anytime we make a decision here that requires significant change like this, we want to look at accident data. That should really guide us in how we make a decision. We do that with stop signs here. We bring it to council. Usually the first question is, what's the accident data? Then we also want to look at, well, if we don't have the data, what are those locations that have the highest probability, meaning the most pedestrian traffic and traffic interactions with pedestrians? Where are those areas? Looking at accident data, I went back 5 years, almost 5 years, from 2019 until current August 2024. We have had 9 pedestrian reported accidents in a crosswalk or intersection. When I pulled all those reports and read them, there was only one that may have been impacted by this law, and that was at Unipero and 6. There was a subject crossing from Bruno's Market towards Devendorf Park. The primary factor in this was darkness because it was nighttime, and the driver specifically said, I couldn't see the person walking. Due to darkness, that's as close as I can come to finding an accident in this town that this law would impact. The fact that a vehicle was parked there may have impacted the visibility, so I included that one as a maybe. The other 8 would not have been impacted at all by this law because it occurred in a different crosswalk after the car had already gone through the intersection, so it wouldn't have impacted that. So what we're presenting to you today is those intersections with the high probability of a traffic accident, including a pedestrian, and where we can put in maybe some of these red zones to be compliant with the law. I'm including Junipero to Monteverde in this study and 5th Avenue to 8th Avenue, which is 99% of the intersections that are impacted by this law because they are sidewalk curb intersections with or without crosswalks. The busiest intersections identified by staff would be 6th and Junipero due to the fact that we have a park right across the street. And then all of the intersections along Ocean Avenue, and then Mission and 8th because of the Sunset Center and a lot of traffic that goes along there. And also Lincoln and 8th, which we do get a lot of pedestrian traffic crossing the street with very difficult sight views in that location. In this study, staff went around and counted our parking stock in this area, and we counted 810 spaces. Again, if you go out and count 812, please give us a little bit of grace because we're trying to count them while we're doing our other work, but I counted 810. I'm saying me. 696 of those are 2-hour spaces. 102 are 30-minute zones or 10-minute zones, painted green. We have 8 commercial loading zones downtown, which many are mid-block. And then we have 4 disabled parking spaces. You might ask yourself why we have so many 30-minute zones. Back in 2014 or 2016, we implemented paid parking. If anybody remembers the kiosks we put along Ocean Avenue. Part of council's recommendation in that plan was to increase the 30-minute zones to help people just pop in and do their business and get out of there without having to buy a parking permit. When we took away the paid parking pilot program, we left a lot of those 30-minute zones in place. So we have an abundance of 30-minute zones. That's going to come into play in a minute. Our recommendation, again, is to meet the legal requirement, which we need to meet to reduce liability. We also want to increase the safety and reduce the impact to our existing parking inventory. Next slide. Our proposed plan, taking those 810 total spaces, would leave us with 689 2-hour spaces. That is 7 less than what we already have. That's implementing this plan. We would reduce the number of 30-minute zones and 10-minute zones down to 40, with very little impact to the post office, City Hall, the library, and what other spot did I have on there? Those are the heavily used 30-minute zones. Those 30-minute zones do not include parking lots like the post office, which has limited time parking. No parking lots. This is just on-street parking. So if we reduce the 30-minute zones down to 40, we can convert a number of those to 20-minute zones, essentially making a 30-minute zone a 20-minute zone, which could be used for loading by businesses and smaller vehicles. In doing this, we could essentially reduce the number of vehicles double parking and blocking an entire lane of traffic for the period when they're loading and unloading products. We're increasing that opportunity to get vehicle traffic moving downtown by moving small vehicles doing their loading and loading into these zones, while also allowing people to park momentarily to load and unload whatever they need to load and unload. This would be an enforcement issue for me to deal with, and we would still be compliant with the law. In doing so, we could maintain the 4 disabled parking spaces we have downtown and add 8 bicycle or electric vehicle spaces also downtown to help increase that ability to park bicycles. In total, we identified 30 intersections that would require a parking space removal to meet compliance, increase safety, and just make it a little bit safer downtown for people, especially in the core area. And I'll show you my hand-drawn map coming up in a minute, but we're talking about 30 parking spaces with a conversion of a number of 30-minute zones, which reduces our 2-hour parking, if you see, by 7 total spaces. So minimizing that impact while meeting the legal requirement and keeping us compliant. All right, let me show you how this looks on paper. And I want to apologize, my back is to the audience, but we have to get this slide going. We had GPS mapping done, but the maps weren't accurate, so we're having those completed. So when we go to council, we'll be able to demonstrate what this looks like on a little bit more professional looking map. But just so everyone has a visual of what we're dealing with here. Let's see. Yeah. Trying to, let's look at, is that 5th on the top?
6.
That's a 6th is on the top. There we go. There's 5th. There you go. 5th. No, I went too far. That's 5th right there. This is our current parking. Well, it's hard to see. All of that green is 30-minute zones, along with the orange, which are commercial loading zones. This is existing. This is the 108 or so 30-minute zones throughout this small area. You can see how many we have south of Ocean Avenue, just a lot of green zones throughout downtown with the loading zones. When we implement this plan, it gets a little more colorful. Orientation, we added a couple locations. You have the police department on the top right of this, and then you have the library, the post office, our other library, and then Devendorf Park. But you can see, and again, the color isn't perfect on here, but a lot more of the orange loading zones instead of green zones, which changed those zones from 30-minute to 20-minute. And then red zones along the core of Ocean Avenue leading down towards the ocean, which if I orient this the right way, might look something like that. Also, our zoom isn't working very well on this, but you can see a lot more red zones, but we're replacing the 30-minute zones. And these are the intersections we've identified as the most dangerous and likely to have a pedestrian vehicle interaction. It increases safety throughout downtown. With this map, you'll also see, I didn't have a color for bicycles, and if I use white, you won't see it. So we have Bs. If you look on the map, hold on, I can't see. Right, whoa, that's hard to do backwards. Right there's a B, and then we have a few others downtown. These are primarily at intersections where we feel bicycle parking would make sense, but also maybe a space that's big enough to put in bicycle parking, but maybe we don't need a red zone or a loading zone in that area. So we identified 8 different locations throughout downtown where we could put in bicycle parking. As I end this presentation, there is flexibility to this plan. And as we present to council, I would ask that staff have that flexibility to make changes as we implement this. Perhaps Public Works is out and they look at it and go, let's reassess this and maybe make it a 30-minute or a loading zone or a red zone, and then we can come back to council with what we implemented. But we're not talking about a big change here. We are talking about 30 parking spaces that we are losing downtown. 30, that's it. But our 2-hour parking would be reduced by 7. So I think it's a pretty good plan that we want to present to council, and we present to you. Take questions.
Excellent shuffling here. This is phenomenal. Nancy Toomey. Question on your diagram, and maybe it doesn't warrant it given the nature of actually what exists, but this guy right here, so right where we're coming up to our triangle intersection, it seems like there's something missing here. And again, maybe their visibility is way clear anyway or something, but it just seems like a gap on that one spot.
Yeah, I will comment on that intersection. If you go there, it's already either red or there's a significant space with no parking already. Okay. So if it's not marked on here and it looks like it needs it, it's because there's already a natural barrier or no parking at all.
Okay, great.
Yep.
This is beautiful. You did remarkable work. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
One of the smartest presentations I've ever seen in this room. Good job.
Thanks, Parker.
I have a question about the loading zones. Will those be timed and then available for someone who's going to dinner that night because the loading zone is not being utilized as a loading zone anymore?
The enforcement would be up to the police department, but it would bring us in compliance with the law.
Okay.
By the time my parking officers try to figure out if it's a commercial vehicle doing the loading and unloading, 20 minutes would elapse. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Well said. Great job. I agree with Parker. I have a question. How does the oversight by, I guess, the state, how does that happen? Do they send somebody down here and try to understand the complexities of what you just went through, or do we just hope that nobody does, or what actually happens after we put this in place? I'm wondering.
I don't know if the state would actually come in, but I do know that this plan brings us compliant with the state, so they would have no argument with this plan at all. The enforcement's left up to the local agency for this. But what this also does do is reduces us the liability factor of not being in compliance with the law.
Another question tied to the Sunset Center and near where we live. Is there, so where is that? Is that?
Up, you slide that over 8th.
Is that up here?
Other way, slide it towards 8th.
Yeah, okay, you're right. Okay, down here. So I'm just wondering, so you called out when you were citing the examples, you called out 8th and San Carlos. Is there a gap at 9th and San Carlos? I mean, there is already a crosswalk there. I just don't know if that's also unaddressed and should be or shouldn't be.
Correct. There is a gap there, but there are a few locations like 9th and San Carlos that I didn't include in this. My map would have gotten too big, but we also recognize that staff will have to go around and locate those areas and paint them red or make them loading zones to be compliant as well. We're not talking about a whole lot of spaces,
Right,
just a
yeah.
few throughout, but we want to address the core area of downtown, which is obviously the biggest impact we have.
Yeah, I think there might be one or two. When you're coming northbound on Sunset, on San Carlos, that would be fronting Sunset Center.
Yes, there would
That
be.
would be the spot that I think might need it.
Yep, right by the Women's Center.
Yes, across from there.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Any other comments?
So one thing I'd like to just add so everyone knows, because we've talked about this, although we, as the chief said, we need to get this in place by January, we are trying to get as much community involvement as possible. So we're not going to go to council in September with this. We're going to have a community meeting focused on this. We're having this as our traffic safety committee. It was programmed every quarter. We will advertise like a broader community meeting focused solely on this topic to get more feedback. Hopefully Parker will show up and tell us it was the smartest presentation he's ever seen again. And then we'll go to council in October. Because as the chief said, we have to go twice to council, first reading of an ordinance and second reading of an ordinance, because we really do want to try to have this plan in place by January 1st.
Yes.
If I may, well, since I was voluntold to be the chair, I have a few comments, a little history on this from my Public Works perspective. Back in January, I think this came as a surprise, certainly came as a surprise to me or a few others. I'm on the Transportation Agency of Monterey County, the TAMC TAC Committee. I see former council member Carolyn Hardy used to be on the board there. TAMC didn't see this coming either, so that was kind of surprising. Initially, earlier in this year, the city of Monterey, which has a big problem implementing this, they have a lot of intersections with bus stops, skew intersections. They had a big challenge, and at first they raised hell they're not going to implement this. Since then, they have. If they can do it, I think we're lucky that we have a much easier caseload on this. So I'm really appreciative of Chief Tomasi in pulling this off, because at first we were looking at this like, oh my gosh, what do we do now? We were a little bit caught by surprise. We do have a great game plan minimizing loss of parking. It's also very flexible, and from a public works perspective, we're only talking about painting curbs that we paint anyway. Let's just use different colors of paint. And I believe there's few, if any, additional signs. We might have a couple of signs maybe for certain cases after we implement this, but there's really no signage here. It's strictly changing the color of some curbs, or a bunch of curbs. So I'm really pleased that this came from chaos to an organized, well-developed plan, and I totally support it going forward, but that's not a vote yet. What do we do now?
Yeah, this is advisory. We're not taking any votes on this. I mean,
Okay.
we're going to go to a community meeting, and then we'll have a traffic safety committee staff report that goes to council recommending the ordinance. But we need to do a little more community work on this first. But this was really a rollout presentation from the chief, who I agree. Kudos to Chief Tomasi. This is his brainchild, and he solved a really difficult puzzle with this. So good job, Chief. Yeah.
Was there anyone on Zoom that wishes to speak on this item? Okay.
All right.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, of course.
Allison Schelling, I just might add that what I loved, Chief, was the fact that you had the slide there, or that showed the parking as it is, and then the net loss. So it was just very clear and very positive. It was just such a great approach to this. So thank you.
Thank you.
okay. Anyone else?
Can I make a comment about what I should have said earlier? Sorry. About Car Week. There's one question I had. Or is it too late?
If you already said you loved everything, you can't take
Well,
that.
I know. But I remembered, like, my question was, there were some blocks during the events that were like 2 blocks away that were no parking.
that just made no sense to a lot of us.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
So we had a few, one of the events.
That was my one.
That's great. No, it's great. No, thank you. It's good feedback. And we're, just so everybody knows, we do a debrief every year with council, and that'll be in October. This year. We have a survey right now if you want to give us feedback like that. But I know exactly what you're talking about, Todd. The event that was planned that day actually expected to go farther down the street, and they didn't. And it was just a miscommunication between the city and the vendor. Like we should have pulled some of that. So it's a lesson learned on that one. And that's, we did some other things that was new this year. The Aston Martin event was new down at the bottom of Ocean. The Ferrari event was bigger. And so we're trying to find lessons learned from all that stuff. But agreed, like that sucked to have that close. So we'll look at that for next year.
Lost parking, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's move on.
You can take my
We'll just leave that up the whole time.
coloring up.
That's a Mona Lisa.
It's on this.
Okay, moving on to other old business, the second item B. The second review of a request for no parking posts on Dolores Street 2 southeast of Vista Avenue, and that's Ms. Schelling. Rob, was this yours initially? Did you want to introduce this?
The no parking spots.
No parking
on
Dolores and Vista?
Oh, there you go.
Maybe get us going. Okay.
About a year ago, it brought to our attention that it was difficult with cars parking in front of this property and with the traffic coming in and out of the school and large trucks parking across the street. So it made it very difficult for her to get in and out of her driveway, and also for larger vehicles to get around the two parked cars.
Okay. Do you want to go over the history since then?
Yeah, we can. The history was we did put in the no parking posts, but determined later it was the neighbor's house, which required us to at least have a conversation with the neighbor before we put no parking in front of their house. So we pulled the posts. We also want to talk to the school to see the impact, which we did. And although no parking would be beneficial at this location, it'd be better to have a no parking space on the other side of the street for trucks coming in and out. Not here, but on the other side. Well, keep going. Is that the exit? Where's the school go? Where'd the school go? The school district go.
Oh, there.
Where with that little black
Where the
truck is.
black truck is, because that gets really narrow, so they wanted their trucks to be able to get in and out there. That's more of a concern. But before we do this, and we want to apologize, we have not been able to get a hold of the neighbor to have a conversation with them about the no parking posts. So until we do that, we can't move forward with this. We can't just put up no parking there. That's where we're at. And if we put no parking where the black truck is, that's actually not the city property, that's county. So we need to work with the county to do it and see if they have any issue with us painting that curb red. So I think a recommendation is to, again, and I wholeheartedly apologize, we need to move this until we have a conversation with the neighbor and see. With AB 413 and Car Week and everything else happening, I have not had the opportunity to reach out to them and talk to them.
But certainly we can still take comments on this item today.
Yeah,
Yep,
please.
Now's the time.
Yes, so thank you. I have to say, as the person who's driving the car out of my driveway, yes, I can see it would be better to have trucks, but people are just sitting, or the truck is just sitting there. I'm actually actively, I was this morning going down to my volunteer work. It was 7:30, I think, and I'm pulling out, there are cars, they're dropping students off. I mean, there was a car parked so in my driveway, I couldn't see, and actually I couldn't even quite get my car backed up the hill, and the cars on the other side, they just have one wheel over the curb, but it's really difficult. So, with all deference to trucks, it's my life that I'm worried about, and somebody in the car coming up the hill. And then I will say that our neighbor is unfortunately particularly impossible to reach. So is it predicated, my safety predicated on this neighbor who does not respond to phone calls? He has a maintenance person who also is, what should I say, less than diligent with any kind of interaction from neighbors. We just went through an incredible garbage issue, but I won't go into that with the neighbor, with no responses. So is it predicated on waiting for this?
Here's what I want to recommend, that we put this on the next agenda, but we resolve it before that.
I think we should contact the city attorney and find out what authority we have to do things to property when we've tried and documented reaching out to a property owner.
Thank you.
But I want to have that opportunity to reach out, which I admittedly haven't had that time. And then we can take a look at that.
And he might respond to the police a little better than he would respond to a neighbor.
So let me work on it, but we'll keep it on here as something we can close out at our next meeting, but I'd like to have it resolved well before that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anyone else wish to speak on this topic? Zoom? Nothing? Okay, so there's no action taken at this point. We'll defer to the next meeting.
Yeah, I'll be on it.
Okay. All right, moving on to item C. This is the second review of a request for a directional sign around the tree at Mountain View Avenue and Guadalupe Street. And this came from Carl and Suzanne Atkins. Who has the original history of this?
I think I do.
I think it's Chief, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so they reached out to me several months ago regarding this intersection at Guadalupe and Mountain View, where a number of vehicles are coming up Guadalupe while vehicles are coming down Guadalupe, and the potential for an accident at this intersection with two-way traffic on this right-hand lane. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Where it's telling people to keep right as they're coming down the hill on Guadalupe, cars coming up Guadalupe are coming through, and the thought was that it's a very risky intersection, and the recommendation was to put a similar keep right sign on the other side of the island, directing traffic coming up Guadalupe to then make a right turn onto Mountain View and then a left in this narrow roadway to go up Guadalupe and continue. This is an uncontrolled intersection, a four-way uncontrolled intersection, so that should be of note. Since we brought this in May, Public Works has gone out and cleared a lot of the vegetation to improve the sight views. And I reviewed the accident data at this intersection. I'm happy to report that in the past 20 years, going back to 2004, we have not had a single accident at this intersection. And again, as I stated with AB 413, a lot of our decision-making in this town is based on really what's our data telling us? What's the accident data? This is a naturally occurring intersection in our community, or in our village, which historically, going back many years, we didn't have stop signs. And we look for opportunities to put them in as needed, and whether they're needed or not. Based on traffic data and accident data, there being no accidents here, I think that should impact our decision here today and as far as the need for it. So I leave that open to everybody else. Comments?
I think I'll wait for comments until we hear from the public.
Good idea.
Yep.
Agreed. Okay, open for public comments. Anyone wishing to speak, now's the time.
For the record, Carolyn Hardy, and I want to first of all say welcome back, Bob.
Oh, thank you.
Nice to see you. I appeared at your last meeting in May on this subject, and I was the one that raised the issue about whether we had a history of accidents at this intersection. So I appreciate you looking into it, Paul. And happy to find out that there aren't any. Off the record, I think there was one drunk driver who hit a tree nearby, and that was it. Mm-hmm. And so, absent any data, it seems like there should be no need to change this intersection. And as you know, in town we try to limit the number of signs, limit the number of stop signs unless they're absolutely needed, but clearly there's no data here that would support placing any kind of a stop sign or even, and I think, directional. I've lived on that street for 38 years and drive this intersection all the time, and there's a common sense, uncontrolled, as I recall my driver education days, that when you approach an uncontrolled intersection, you slow down and look for other traffic. And that's what I do in this intersection all the time, and that's what I've seen cars in front of me do. When you travel from 8th and coming towards Guadalupe, so in essence you're going east on 8th, right, and approaching that intersection, when I want to come across, I always slow up to look for other traffic. Yesterday, there was a car doing exactly that in front of me. They approached the intersection, they traveled slowly, and they made up their way to Guadalupe near the four-seater fence, but on the left side of the tree, the collection of trees. And actually, there is no visibility issues there. You can actually see through the fence and see if any cars are coming down Guadalupe. And if you're cautious and careful, there's not an issue. And actually, if there was a car coming down, that's wide enough for 2 cars to pass. Not on the other side of the park, but on that side there would be. So visibility is not an issue. It's not blind or obstructed. Common sense says when you come down Guadalupe, you can just go directly across 8th Avenue. People coming from Mountain View who might be making a left turn on Guadalupe would have a hard time, especially if it's a truck or somebody pulling a trailer, making it past that and making a 180-degree turn to go back up Guadalupe. And that would be difficult too. I've never been in favor of a directional sign forcing the direction around that. A 2-way there by the Forest Theater gate is not a problem. Never has been. Thank you.
So I don't know in the setup if you clarified that one of the decisions that you could make is putting a directional sign in front of that island as we're looking at it right now on the screen. If it is something that you wanted to consider, although I support what Carolyn Hardy just mentioned, if there is a decision to put a directional sign to veer around the island to the right, that it really should not be just a right arrow. It should be a circular arrow of some sort, or a half round arrow, so that it really clarifies that you're going around something. So if that's the decision, please make sure that it's not just a straight arrow. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else wish to speak? No one on Zoom? Okay, we'll bring it back to the committee. Did you want to go? I have a couple of comments.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. It's funny, Nancy, you bring that up. When we were standing out there yesterday, the chief and I and Rob were standing on the right-hand side of the road here at the corner of 8th and looking at the angle. And this picture doesn't really do the angle justice if you were going to go in that upper part around the park. So what we kind of came to the conclusion was it probably isn't a good idea to put any sign there to require people to go around that way, because if you're driving a big truck or, God forbid, pulling a trailer, you may find yourself not being able to make it back around that, and then you're actually having to stop and back into a roadway. So I think it's another one of those uncontrolled intersection choices to make that, if I've got a long vehicle or I'm not comfortable in my skills in navigating a sharp corner, I'm going to go up that pathway. And we did verify out there just visually that it is, it's as wide as some of our streets in town, and can hold 2 vehicles going in either direction on the left-hand side of that small little pocket park there. That was my one comment I wanted to start with, is whatever we do, I don't think the correct action is to put any sort of directional sign on this side of that pocket park.
Thanks, Brendan. I had a couple of comments and, comments. First of all, the tree acts as an offset roundabout at a skew intersection. So it's kind of a very odd situation in the first place. And I am happy to be a very big roundabout advocate, having built the one up in Chomp. But this one is really strange. Certainly the street off to the left, Guadalupe, certainly is wide enough for 2. There was talk, and apparently It's, my guess is that it's not warranted at this point, but we could easily put a stripe along that section of road and do the arrows northbound and southbound. So we could do that to delineate that's a two-way street, which is what's the way it's serving today. So that's an option. Maybe it's not warranted. But the real concern I had when we first saw this a few months ago was, if you look in this picture on the right-hand side, there's no stop sign into the intersection. So it's uncontrolled stop at 8th northbound. The fact that we haven't had any accidents in 20 years indicates to me that it's not warranted to have a stop sign there. If there was an accident, I think that's the first thing we would suggest to do to the city council, but we're not there yet. And hopefully, and people are supposed to be going 25?
Yeah.
That's what I always do, so I was, make sure. Okay. So it's not warranted at this point, but that's a little gnarly in my professional opinion, as doing a lot of traffic engineering over the years. It's not warranted yet. By all means, we could do some striping on the pavement. That's easy to do. Probably wouldn't hurt, but that's for our discussion. But if we want to implement no traffic control measures at this point, I have no objection to that as well.
I'll just quick comment. This isn't the only intersection in this part of town or in our village that doesn't have stop signs. It's an uncontrolled intersection. We do have still a few remaining intersections like this, especially this part of the village enjoys that culture and the character of our community. We have naturally occurring traffic calming devices like trees growing in the middle of the street, which is part of the character and the charm of this community. That gets people to slow down anyway. It's pitch dark at night. That gets people to slow down as they drive through. The fact that we don't have the traffic data, the accident data, tells me that that's working, and we don't need to add a stop sign. And I can guarantee you, if we went to council with a stop sign recommendation, they would ask us about the accident data. So it doesn't support it in my mind. I don't see the issue here. And I say we continue as is would be my recommendation, with no changes to this intersection at all.
Did you want to make that as a motion?
That would be my motion.
Okay. A second?
Sure. You said it. Go ahead.
I'll
second it.
I'll second that
There you go.
motion. We're debating who's seconding the motion. That's interesting.
We're very good at making decisions.
Okay. All right. About if you could please do a roll call.
Brandon Swanson,
Yes.
Paul Tomasi,
Yes.
Bob Harari.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion is passed.
Okay, great. And then last, this is a new item. It's a review or request for a stop sign or a no parking post at Torres Street and 6th Avenue. We can bring that up. And who received this original item? Was that you, Rob?
It was
It was actually received.
Public comment.
Yeah, it was. We all received it.
Yes.
We all did.
We all received it at the same time. I can call a resident again and ask for more information if you want. Yeah. So I'll tee this up and you guys can fill in the pieces if you want. But at our last traffic safety committee meeting, we had a new neighbor, a resident that just moved to town, and brought up some concerns about this intersection, focused mainly upon, as you're approaching this stop sign, as you can see, it's controlled in the 6th Avenue directions, but not going in the cross street of Torres. And if you back up just one click for me, Rob, that vehicle there on the corner, as you're coming up 6th heading east, was part of the concern, the fact that there was some concern about visibility going down Torres, whether or not you could see vehicles coming. The stop sign is set back a little bit. The limit line is set back. And so you do have to have some window to be able to look down the street. But that was the thing that was brought up, was visibility down the street, and would a stop sign at all four corners prevent the risk of a collision here. That's it.
Hi.
Do you guys have any questions? So, I mean, what we should do is, if you guys have any questions about what we heard, and then we open it up for public comment, and then we can deliberate on it.
I think you, I think you covered it well. I think as long as we mention that if you're driving in this direction as shown on 6, that vehicle parked not along a curb but sticking out as we have on that section, there's a visual barrier there for cross traffic. So that was part of the problem that we identified on our tour and was brought up at the last meeting as well.
One of the things, just before we go to public comment so the public's aware, the other thing we identified when we did our site tour is that the stop sign on the east side of the intersection, as you can see way back there in the distance, is set back probably a good 15-ish feet from the actual intersection, maybe more. So that was one thing that we talked about, possibly moving that stop sign forward. This was not a request from the meeting. This is something the Traffic Safety Committee noticed while we were out there. So if any members of the public want to provide feedback on that and during your testimony, please feel free. But we will be considering as part of this also moving that stop sign closer to the intersection so it lines up with the limit line a little bit better.
Great. Beat me to it. Okay, with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions. Be happy to open up for any comments.
Hi, Rob Lechner. I was a new resident who actually brought this, who teed this up.
Thank you for coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I thank you very much for taking the time to at least look at it. I think the idea of moving the stop sign up would be great. But I walk this several times a day, and the stop signs really to, I think, the average driver in this community is, I'll slow down if I think I need to. That's what the stop sign means there. I think in my observations so far, and I'm sure speed lumps are absolutely taboo in this community, but my observations are 6th, like 5th, and like 4th are simply cut-throughs for locals who don't want to come down Ocean and get backed up in traffic at Unipro. That's the bottom line. So they literally blow down 6th. There's a neighbor of ours who lives right next to one of our council members, Bobby Richards. Her name is Leslie. I don't know her last name. Saw her just a week ago, and she said, she was very rattled, and she says, I came this close to getting hit. Coming down this little walkway from a natural area from Santa Fe down to 6th, and people just blow down 6th. That's the bottom line. So a stop sign, I think, at the bottom helps from and I think this, Carol, I think you talked at the last meeting about it, about maybe getting rid of that one parking spot, I think would be great. I think Brandon, to your idea of maybe moving the stop sign up so people could actually see it clearer, I think is great. But I still think the more inherent problem is it's a cut through, it's a shortcut, and 6th is just a breezeway. So if there's anything to be done, great. If not, I think the measures that you're taking are fabulous, and I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. Anybody else wishing to address this issue?
Yeah, I'll add a little more to that too. I think the idea of moving the stop signs is an excellent idea when it's so far back from the intersection. I use this cut through all the time. I love it. But it's a short block. So when I come down Ocean, turn right on Torrey's, it's a short block, and I know, because I travel it all the time, I know to watch for cars traversing 6th from the stop sign because I know they can't see me very well. And one of the visual impairments are those cars parked diagonally near the corner on Torrey's. And it may not be that we can eliminate parking spots, but you might find another way to address the visibility issues of things parking there in some way. And if people are coming down 6th, that's a pretty bumpy, lumpy, awful conditioned street. No offense, Bob, for Public Works. But, it's hard to blow through this intersection because it's a two-way stop sign for 6th Avenue. Mm-hmm. And so people should be slowing up, but I think if you put those stop signs, and I'm not sure whether you need to maybe move your stop lines in some way, maybe a little farther out heading east on 6th. I don't know where it is right now. It might be right near the stop sign. No, on the corner where the hotel is. Yeah, there. Because the stop line puts you pretty far back, and when you're looking for traffic from your right coming from Torrey's, they're a little hard to see. But I don't think this needs a lot. One of the things about Carmel, too, is we don't have crosswalks marked everywhere. And that's the thing about foot traffic here. I've seen plenty of foot traffic on 6th and Torrey's, and it's just living in Carmel. It's just the nature of the beast. So move your stop signs so they're more visible and address the parking stalls on that corner. That'd be my request.
Can I ask Carolyn and also the previous speaker, when we were down there, we noted that when we were there, it was a 4-door, like low-slung sedan, more of a compact vehicle in the corner, not a small SUV like this one. I'm assuming, and maybe you guys can confirm this for me, I'm assuming that the issue is exacerbated a little bit when it's like a large truck or a construction vehicle or a van.
I've seen pickup trucks parked there. They've been pretty large. So, yeah, it's the size of the vehicle that can make a difference, too. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for the folks on Zoom, the gentleman in the audience also said yes to that.
Rob, leave that up.
Hi, Alison Schelling again. Seeing as I'm here, I might as well comment. Yes, absolutely, moving the stop sign so that it's actually at the intersection would be extremely helpful. And it actually is my observation, and I think, I've owned property here for over 30 years, that people do blow through stop signs, and it seems to have just got worse and worse. And I think that we're all just doing it everywhere. So, I mean, it becomes especially dangerous in Carmel because of the sight issues, but also at night, when there's no traffic lights. No lighting in the town, but people really are blowing through. So any more safety that we can bring into play, I think, is a really good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the committee. I have a few comments. One, it sounds like there's community consensus to move the stop sign, as we saw to our inspection the other day. I'm concerned, Ms. Hardy's comment about moving the stop bar out into further into the intersection. Yes, it would improve the situation for the driver's visibility. However, even though we have non-ADA compliant ramps, it's really the crosswalk location. So it's not good to have a crosswalk and then stop. We need to stop before the crosswalk. We have a similar situation at 7th and Junipero.
Yeah.
Similar situation, which we're working on addressing that by doing, some bulb outs. So I think I would prefer not to relocate that. We also talked about, yes, if it's a big truck or, vehicle, that's certainly I think we all recognize the situation there. We talked about the possibility of making it a motorcycle space, which is easy to change. Certainly a motorcycle is a lot easier to see through or see above or see around. So maybe that's part of the solution. I just wanted to throw that out there for our discussion.
I think that's one alternative, but I think maybe a middle-of-the-road solution might be rather than making a motorcycle space, just make it a compact space, because like we're looking at a large SUV right now.
Right.
If it was marked as a compact space, you would really only get those low-slung, sedans and smaller cars that would park there. So maybe we can try that and see what it does. And then to the limit line, I do think Carolyn makes a really good point. Perhaps what we can do, we can go out there and look, because I think I agree with what you're saying, Bob. Like if we push the limit line too far forward, the nose of the car potentially is going to interact with a pedestrian crossing there, especially on this one that we're looking at right now. Across the street, that's not really as much of a defined cross. So perhaps what we can do, I guess I'll make this as kind of a motion. I would recommend that we convert the two last spaces on the corner there to compact spaces, and we move the stop sign on the east side of the intersection as far west as possible, and look at both limit lines and move them as far into the intersection as we possibly can while keeping the pedestrians safe. There may be some room to even gain 6 inches somewhere, and every little bit helps if the goal is to get the nose of the car farther forward to prevent people coming across on the street, down the street and other cars to see a vehicle. So that would be my motion.
I like that motion. Yeah, even if we could move it 6 inches, it's a step in the right direction. I would support that and second the motion there. Comments, Paul?
You can
comments on the motion?
No, actually, I agree with the motion. Rob, I had a question. Do you know the history of why that sign was placed so far back?
I think there was a large group of trees that were here
Oh.
in the past.
That would
and
make sense,
You weren't
yeah.
able to see it.
Perfect, okay.
Makes sense.
So there's room now to move it. Okay, I agree with the motion. I'm ready to
Okay, I think we're ready to vote.
vote.
Brandon Swanson,
Yes.
Paul Tomasi.
Yes.
Bob Harari.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion is passed.
Okay, that's all we have for today. I guess our next meeting is in 3 months on a Wednesday afternoon.
But we will have a
but-
community meeting sometime in September to
Thank you.
discuss AB 413.
Do we have the date for the next traffic safety meeting?
I don't know, Rob, do we have the next date set?
It's on my calendar. And
So yes, we do,
on
but
my
we don't know
desktop
what it is.
computer.
Yes.
So stay tuned for that.
Okay,
And we're addressing the shilling
yes.
item.
That's right.
Prior.
We will come back with a solution on that. And then, Mr. Chair, you want to say that we're adjourned?
It's November 27th. Is that,
Yeah.
is that
That's the next
Thanksgiving?
meeting?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
one of Thanksgiving?
Is that Thanksgiving?
That's the day before Thanksgiving, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's the next meeting, and with that, the meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
I want to do that. Yeah, he did it.
He didn't do it.
Yes.
He didn't do it.
I'm glad the rippers weren't so bad. It wasn't too noisy.
I didn't talk, I don't know, maybe you didn't know, but I talked to Queen.
Oh, I talked to the foreman.
You're welcome.
Thank you.